Hey everyone, I'm posting this here because I feel like I need to get it out of my system. I don't know if I'm looking for advice or just someone to tell me I'm not crazy, but here's my story. My name is Ryan, and my wife, Jessica, and I have been married for 8 years. At first, our relationship felt like a dream. Jessica is one of those women who commands attention without even trying. She's got this effortless charisma, the kind that makes people want to be around her. I was proud to call her my wife. We had the house, the steady jobs, the weekend barbecues with friends. It felt like everything was in place. But over the last few months, something changed. At first, it was small things. Jessica started spending more time on her phone, angling the screen away from me or leaving the room when it buzzed. She suddenly got really into work trips, which weren't all that common before. She always had a plausible reason. Oh, my boss is really pushing me for this client, or networking is key if I'm going to get that promotion. I wanted to believe her. Who wouldn't? But little inconsistencies started piling up. She'd come home late and have these flimsy excuses. Once, she claimed her coworker Amanda had a flat tire and needed her help, but when I casually mentioned it to Amanda's husband at a get-together, he had no idea what I was talking about. It was like Jessica had started living a double life, and I was too scared to pull at the threads. The real turning point came when she went on this week-long business trip to Miami. Jessica had always been a sharp dresser, but the suitcase she packed raised an eyebrow. I'm no prude, but why would someone need 3 cocktail dresses and lingerie for client meetings? I brushed it off, thinking maybe she just wanted to feel confident. When she got back, I was waiting for her in the kitchen. She swept in with that dazzling smile and a small carry-on bag, tossing her jacket onto the chair like everything was perfectly normal. We talked for a bit, and she gave me the usual rundown of boring meetings and bad hotel coffee. But when I hugged her, she smelled different. Not like her usual floral perfume, but something muskier. A chill ran down my spine, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. Later that night, as she slept, I decided to do the laundry, a chore I rarely took on. That's when I found it. A blouse she'd worn on the trip had this faint, white, sticky stain near the hem. At first, I told myself it could be anything: lotion, sunscreen, even spilled food. But the stain was suspicious. My gut screamed at me, but my head was desperately trying to rationalize it. I bagged the blouse in a Ziploc and tucked it into a drawer. I didn't know why I did it at the time, but something in me knew I'd need proof. Proof of what? I didn't even want to answer that question yet. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. I didn't want to believe what my gut was telling me. Jessica was my wife, my best friend, the woman who promised me forever. But something wasn't adding up, and I was terrified of what I might find if I kept digging. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. The next day, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Jessica went about her routine like nothing had happened, chatting about a new project at work, flipping through her phone at breakfast, and leaving for the office with a breezy kiss on my cheek. It was maddening. How could she act so normal when my world felt like it was teetering on the edge? I decided to follow my instincts and figure out what was really going on. I still had the blouse tucked away, and the stain gnawed at me like a splinter in my mind. Finally, I decided to test it. I did some research and found a lab that could analyze biological substances anonymously. I dropped off the sample, paid the fee, and told myself I was being ridiculous. But the doubts didn't go away. In fact, the waiting made them worse. That evening, Jessica came home later than usual, claiming she had back-to-back meetings. She smelled faintly of alcohol and was wearing a slinky black dress I'd never seen before. "Wow," I said, trying to sound casual. "Didn't realize your office dress code was so upgraded these days." She laughed it off. "Oh, this? Amanda and I grab drinks after work. Networking, babe. You know how it is." Amanda again. Of course. I played along, but my chest was tight with suspicion. Over dinner, I asked about her Miami trip, just little questions to test her story. Her answers were polished, almost rehearsed, but I caught one slip. She mentioned a late-night brainstorming session with the team at her hotel. Later, when I asked which client it was for, she fumbled. Uh, the O'Brien account. You know, the one I told you about last week. I knew she hadn't mentioned it before. Jessica had always been a smooth talker, but this time, her explanation felt forced, like she was scrambling to keep her lies straight. The following day, the lab emailed me the results of the stain test. I remember staring at my phone, feeling my stomach drop as I read the report. Semen sample from an unknown male, not matching the DNA of the submitted husband's control sample. My hands shook. I sat down on the couch, rereading the email over and over, hoping I was misunderstanding it. But there it was, clear as day. It wasn't mine. My heart pounded, and a whirlwind of emotions crashed over me. Anger, humiliation, betrayal. It was like someone had lit a match and dropped it into my chest. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe there was some explanation, something innocent. But deep down, I knew the truth. Jessica was cheating on me. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, replaying every interaction from the last few months. The secretive phone calls, the late nights, the business trips, it all lined up too perfectly. That night, I decided to confront her. I needed answers. She came home around 8 p.m., looking frazzled but still managing that effortless charm. "Long day," she sighed, kicking off her heels. "I need a drink." "Sit down," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Jessica froze, her smile faltering. "What's wrong?" I held up my phone with the lab results pulled up. "Care to explain this?" Her face went pale, and for a split second, I saw real fear in her eyes. But then she recovered, flipping the switch to full-on denial mode. "What the hell, Ryan?" she snapped, crossing her arms. "Are you spying on me? Testing my clothes? That's insane." "Don't turn this around on me," I shot back. "I found a stain on your blouse from Miami. It wasn't mine. You're going to sit there and tell me I'm crazy?" Jessica scoffed, rolling her eyes. "It was probably from someone brushing up against me at the bar. Do you know how many drunk creeps spill drinks on people? You're seriously accusing me of something this stupid?" Her gaslighting was almost impressive. She delivered her lies with such conviction, it made me second-guess myself for half a second. But then I remembered the lab report, the mounting evidence, the gut feeling that had been screaming at me for weeks. "Cut the crap, Jessica," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Tell me the truth." Her expression hardened. "You know what? This is pathetic. If you don't trust me, maybe we shouldn't even be together." And just like that, she flipped the script. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She went straight for the jugular, acting like I was the problem. I stared at her, stunned. Was this the woman I'd married? The woman I thought I knew? The conversation ended with her storming out, slamming the door behind her. I sat there in the silence, my mind racing. I didn't have the full story yet, but one thing was clear. Jessica wasn't the woman I thought she was, and I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Jessica didn't come home that night. She didn't call, didn't text, just disappeared. I spent hours pacing the living room, alternating between anger and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. It felt like my entire life had been flipped upside down in an instant. The woman I thought I knew, the one I built my life around, was a stranger. By morning, I knew I couldn't just let this slide. If Jessica wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. I started by checking her phone records. She'd left her old phone bills in a drawer, and I combed through them with a fine-tooth comb. One number stood out: repeated calls, sometimes late at night or during her supposed work trips. I didn't recognize it, and when I tried calling, it went straight to voicemail. I kept digging. Jessica's laptop was password protected, but I knew her well enough to guess it. Sure enough, her favorite band and the year we got married unlocked everything. What I found made my blood boil. Her email inbox was mostly work-related, but tucked away in a folder labeled Receipts were messages from a burner account. They were exchanges with someone named Evan, and they weren't the kind of messages you'd send to a colleague. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You're incredible. Counting the days until I see you again. Miami was unforgettable. Next time, I'm booking the hotel with the jacuzzi suite." The dates matched her business trips perfectly. My heart pounded as I read through them, feeling like I was suffocating under the weight of the truth. Evan wasn't just some fling. He was a full-blown affair. As if that wasn't enough, I found photos, selfies of Jessica in lingerie, ones I'd never seen before, sent to this man. There were no pictures of him, but it didn't matter. The evidence was there, undeniable. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. I'd always trusted Jessica, always given her the benefit of the doubt. Now, I was staring at the proof that she'd been lying to me for months, maybe longer. When she finally came home that evening, I was ready. She walked in like nothing had happened, dropping her bag on the couch and kicking off her shoes. "Hey," she said casually, like she hadn't vanished for a full day without a word. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Out," she said, shrugging. "Needed some time to clear my head after your little accusation last night." "Clear your head? Or spend time with Evan?" Jessica froze, her expression a mix of shock and panic. "What are you talking about?" I didn't say anything. I just slid the laptop across the table, the emails and photos pulled up for her to see. Her face went pale, but then, almost unbelievably, she started laughing. "You went through my laptop?" she said, shaking her head. "Wow, Ryan, you're really losing it." "Don't even try," I said, my voice rising. "I saw everything, Jessica. The emails, the pictures, the trips to Miami. How long has this been going on? Months? Years?" She rolled her eyes, brushing past me like I wasn't even worth addressing. "You're being dramatic." "Dramatic?" I snapped, following her into the kitchen. "You've been lying to me, cheating on me, and I'm the one who's dramatic?" Jessica grabbed a glass of water, her movements calm, calculated. "You know what your problem is, Ryan? You're boring. You've been boring for years. Evan makes me feel alive, like I'm actually worth something. So, yeah, I cheated. Congratulations on figuring it out." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. "Boring?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You think that justifies betraying me? Lying to me?" "You wouldn't understand," she said, sipping her water. "Evan actually appreciates me. He doesn't treat me like some trophy wife or an afterthought." I stood there, stunned. How could she twist this around to make herself the victim? "You're unbelievable," I said, my anger boiling over. "Do you even care that you've destroyed our marriage? Or are you just so wrapped up in your own selfishness that it doesn't matter?" Jessica shrugged, her face completely devoid of remorse. "If you're so miserable, maybe you should leave." Leave? After everything she'd done, she had the audacity to suggest I walk away like this was my fault? But as much as I wanted to scream at her, I realized something in that moment. Jessica wasn't going to change. She didn't care about me, about our marriage, about the life we'd built together. And if she thought I was just going to roll over and let her get away with this, she had another thing coming. Jessica stormed upstairs after our confrontation, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter, my mind spinning. Every word she said replayed in my head, each one cutting deeper than the last. "You're boring. Maybe you should leave." She didn't just cheat. She justified it. She twisted the knife and then blamed me for bleeding. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I went back to the laptop, determined to find out just how deep her betrayal went. The emails and photos were bad enough, but something told me there was more. People like Jessica don't stop at one lie. They weave entire webs of deceit. It didn't take long to find it. Buried in a hidden folder, tucked away in her cloud storage, were videos. My hands trembled as I opened the first one. There she was, sitting on the edge of a hotel bed, wearing that black dress I'd noticed the night she came home late. Jessica was smiling at the camera, her hair tousled, her lipstick slightly smudged. "You really think I'm going to wear this to dinner?" she laughed, her voice teasing. "You're such a bad influence." The camera shifted, and a man's voice responded. I couldn't make out the words, but it was clear he was enjoying himself. My stomach churned as the video continued, their flirtatious banter making me feel sick. I forced myself to watch, even when the scene grew more intimate, more damning. It wasn't just a fling. The way she looked at him, the way she laughed, was a side of her I hadn't seen in years. There were more videos. One in a hotel lobby, their fingers brushing as they shared a private joke. Another of them lounging on a beach, Jessica in a bikini I'd never seen before, sipping cocktails and looking carefree. Each clip was like a dagger to the chest. This wasn't just cheating. She'd built an entire life with someone else, a life I wasn't a part of. But then, I saw the one that changed everything. It started with Jessica sitting on a balcony, her face lit by the glow of her phone. She was talking to Evan, complaining about me. "Ryan's such a pushover," she said, rolling her eyes. "He's so predictable. I swear, I could tell him I'm working late, and he'd just nod and say, 'Okay, honey.'" Evan laughed off camera. "Guess that makes things easier for us." Jessica smirked. "Exactly. He's clueless. And even if he found out, what's he going to do? Cry about it? Please." I paused the video, my hands shaking with rage. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was mocking me, treating me like I was some joke. At that moment, something inside me snapped. The next morning, Jessica was back to her usual routine, acting like nothing had happened. She breezed past me on her way out the door, her phone glued to her hand. "I'll be home late," she said over her shoulder. "Work meeting." I didn't respond. I just watched her go, already putting my plan into motion. I wasn't going to confront her again. I wasn't going to argue or beg for answers. Jessica had made it clear she had no respect for me or our marriage. So, I decided to give her exactly what she deserved. Later that day, I made a few phone calls. First, to our lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Karen who didn't flinch when I explained the situation. "You want a divorce?" she asked. "Eventually," I said. "But first, I want to make sure I have the upper hand." Next, I reached out to Jessica's boss. It wasn't hard to find his number. He'd been to our house for dinner parties before. "Hi, Mark, it's Ryan," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Listen, I've come across something you might want to know about. It involves Jessica and one of her so-called business trips." Mark sounded concerned, but I didn't give him the full story yet. I wanted to wait for the perfect moment to drop that bomb. Finally, I made a copy of the videos and emails and uploaded them to a secure drive. They were my insurance, a way to ensure Jessica couldn't wriggle out of this. That evening, Jessica came home late, just as she said she would. But this time, I wasn't waiting for her in the kitchen. I was upstairs in the bedroom, sitting on the bed with my laptop open. When she walked in, she looked surprised to see me. "What are you doing up here?" she asked, kicking off her heels. "Waiting for you," I said calmly. Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Without a word, I hit play on the balcony video. Jessica's face went from confused to horrified in an instant. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "I told you," I said, standing up and meeting her gaze. "I know everything." Her bravado crumbled. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. But it didn't last long. Jessica was nothing if not quick on her feet. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms. "So, now you know. What are you going to do about it?" I smiled, a cold, calculated smile that made her falter. "You'll see," I said, walking past her and out the door. Jessica's arrogance lit a fire in me. That smug question, "What are you going to do about it?" was all I needed to push forward. She thought I was weak, predictable, and easy to manipulate. What she didn't realize was that I had reached my breaking point. While she slept soundly that night, I stayed up late making preparations. This wasn't just about ending our marriage. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done, to see her lies collapse around her. The next day, I started setting the trap. First, I called Mark, her boss, again. "Hey, Mark," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday. I have some documents you might want to see." Mark hesitated. "Documents? About what?" "Jessica's trips," I said simply, "and how they might not have been for work." I emailed him screenshots of the emails between Jessica and Evan, along with a few choice photos. Nothing explicit, just enough to make it clear that her business trips had nothing to do with business. About an hour later, Mark called me back. his voice tight. Ryan, this is serious. If what you're saying is true, Jessica's actions could jeopardize our client relationships and our company's reputation. Exactly, I said, letting the silence hang for a moment. I just thought you should know who you're dealing with. My next move was to reach out to Evan. I'd found his contact information through the emails. Jessica, in her carelessness, had forwarded one of his messages to her personal account. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. Hello? He answered when I called, his voice cautious. Evan, this is Ryan, Jessica's husband, I said, my tone icy. There was a long pause. I don't know what you're talking about, he said eventually. Don't play dumb, I snapped. I've seen the emails, the photos, the videos. I know everything. Evan stammered, clearly caught off guard. Look, man, I didn't mean for things to get out of hand. Jessica told me you two were having problems. Save it. I cut him off. I'm not calling to hear your excuses. I just thought you should know that Jessica has a little surprise for you. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice uneasy. She's carrying a fatal STD, I said bluntly. You might want to get yourself tested. Evan went silent. Didn't she tell you? I continued, twisting the knife. Guess she forgot to mention that part. Or maybe she doesn't know yet. Either way, have fun explaining that to your next girlfriend. I hung up before he could respond. By the end of the day, I had everything in place. Jessica had no idea what was coming. That evening, I waited for her to come home. She walked in looking tired, but still carrying that air of indifference. Rough day? I asked, barely concealing my smirk. You have no idea, she said, kicking off her shoes. Mark called me into his office to grill me about some nonsense. Can you believe he accused me of being unprofessional during my trips? He wouldn't even tell me where he got his information. That's awful, I said, feigning concern. She shrugged. I'll handle it. He's probably just trying to cover his own ass. I couldn't help but laugh, softly at first, then louder as the absurdity of her confidence hit me. Jessica frowned. What's so funny? Oh, nothing, I said, standing up, just thinking about how everything's about to blow up in your face. Her eyes narrowed. What are you talking about now? You'll find out soon enough, I said, brushing past her on my way to the door. Hope you're ready for the fallout. The next morning, I set the final stage of my plan into motion. I forwarded the videos, emails, and photos to Jessica's closest friends and family. I kept my message short and to the point. I thought you should know what Jessica's been up to. This is why our marriage is ending. The responses started pouring in almost immediately. Shocked texts from her friends. Angry calls from her parents. Jessica had built her reputation on being the perfect wife, the successful career woman, the one who had it all together. Now, that image was shattered. That afternoon, while Jessica was at work, I met with Karen, our lawyer. I've reviewed everything you sent me, Karen said, her expression grim. We can file for divorce on grounds of infidelity, but there's more. If her affair affected her work performance or the company's finances, that could have legal implications as well. Do whatever it takes, I said firmly. I want her to feel this in every part of her life. Karen nodded. Consider it done. That evening, Jessica came home to a barrage of phone calls and texts. She looked panicked, her phone vibrating constantly as she tried to keep up with the incoming messages. What did you do? She demanded, her voice shaking. I leaned back in my chair, a satisfied smile on my face. Just gave everyone a glimpse of the real Jessica. You're insane, she hissed, tears welling in her eyes. No, I said calmly. I'm done being your fool. Jessica sat on the couch, her face pale as she scrolled through the messages pouring into her phone. I could see her hands trembling, the screen lighting up with notifications from her family, friends, and coworkers. The walls were closing in, and for the first time, she couldn't gaslight her way out of it. You're unbelievable, she said, her voice cracking. Do you know what you've done? I crossed my arms, leaning against the kitchen counter. I've done what you refused to do, Jessica. I told the truth. She stood abruptly, clutching her phone. You had no right to expose me like this. This is my private life. I couldn't help but laugh. Private? You mean the life where you lied to everyone around you? Where you mocked me, humiliated me, and betrayed every promise you ever made? Yeah, Jessica, that's real private. She glared at me, tears streaming down her face. But there was no apology, no remorse, only anger and indignation. The fallout was immediate. Jessica's parents, Margaret and Robert, were the first to call me. They'd always loved me, treating me like the son they never had. When they saw the videos and emails, their disappointment in Jessica was palpable. "Ryan, we're so sorry," Margaret said, her voice heavy with emotion. "We had no idea she was capable of something like this." "I appreciate that," I said. "But this isn't about me. You need to talk to your daughter. She's the one who did this." Later that night, I overheard Jessica's furious phone call with her mother. "Mom, you don't understand," she said, pacing the living room. "Ryan's exaggerating everything. He's trying to make me look bad because he's bitter." I shook my head, amazed at her audacity. Even with everything out in the open, she still couldn't take responsibility. At work, things weren't going much better for her. Mark, her boss, had called her into another meeting. This time, he confronted her directly with the evidence I'd shared. "I told you I'd handle it," Jessica said to me afterward, her voice tight with frustration. "Mark has no right to bring my personal life into the office." "You mean the life where you slept with a coworker and lied about it to everyone?" I shot back. She glared at me. "I'm on thin ice now, thanks to you. If I lose my job—" "Good," I interrupted. "You deserve it." Then, there was Evan. I didn't hear from him directly, but I got a sense of how things were going when Jessica came home one night, her face red with fury. "Do you think it's funny to ruin people's lives?" she spat, slamming her purse onto the table. "Ruin lives?" I said, feigning confusion. "I thought you said your relationship with Evan was worth it. Isn't that what you told him?" Jessica froze, her eyes narrowing. "What did you do?" "I told him the truth," I said, shrugging. "That you've got a little souvenir from your extracurricular activities. You're lucky he didn't get there first to tell me." Her face went pale. "You're lying." "Am I?" I said, enjoying the panic that flickered across her face. "You might want to check in on him. Last I heard, he was pretty upset." Over the next few days, Jessica tried everything to regain control. She called her friends, begging them to hear her side of the story. She tried to spin it as a rough patch in our marriage, claiming I was blowing things out of proportion. But the videos, the emails, and the photos were too damning. People started distancing themselves from her, and she began to unravel. One night, she cornered me in the kitchen, her eyes wild with desperation. "What do you want from me, Ryan?" she demanded. "You've already destroyed my reputation. What else could you possibly want?" I leaned in, my voice calm but icy. "I want you to feel what it's like to lose everything. The way you made me feel." Her face twisted in anger. "You're such a petty, vindictive—" "Stop," I cut her off. "You don't get to insult me anymore. You did this to yourself." The next morning, Karen called with an update. "Jessica's infidelity puts you in a strong position," she said. "The court will take this into account during the divorce proceedings. You could walk away with the house and a favorable financial settlement." "Good," I said. "Let's move forward." That evening, I sat Jessica down in the living room. She looked tired, defeated, completely different from the confident, smug woman she'd been just days ago. "We're done," I said simply. "I'm filing for divorce." Karen's already started the paperwork. Jessica stared at me, her lips trembling. "You don't have to do this, Ryan. We can fix this. I made a mistake, but I love you. Doesn't that mean anything?" I shook my head. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done any of this. You don't love me, Jessica. You love yourself." Her tears came then, but they didn't move me. "Not anymore." "Pack your things," I said. "You're leaving." Jessica didn't pack her things right away. Instead, she sat there on the couch, staring at me as if I just flipped her world upside down. "You're throwing me out?" she asked, her voice breaking. "No," I replied, leaning back against the wall. "You threw yourself out when you decided to destroy everything we built." Her tears started again, but this time I wasn't moved. In the past, I'd been the one to fold at the sight of her crying, but now, I saw those tears for what they really were: manipulation. "Ryan, please," she said, standing up and reaching for my hand. "Don't do this. I messed up, but I can fix it. We can fix it. I love you." I pulled my hand away. "Stop saying that. You don't get to use that word after what you've done." Jessica's face twisted with frustration. "You're being so stubborn. I'm trying to make amends, but you won't even give me a chance." "A chance?" I snapped, finally losing my patience. "A chance to what? Lie to me again? Cheat on me again?" "Jessica, you didn't just break my trust. You annihilated it. There's no coming back from this." That night, I stayed in the guest room. Jessica stayed downstairs, the occasional muffled sob reaching my ears. But I felt no guilt, no sympathy. For once, I was done putting her feelings above my own. The next morning, I called Karen to finalize the divorce strategy. "She's still in the house," I told her, "but I want her out as soon as possible." Karen was calm and methodical. "We can file an immediate motion to have her removed. If you're pursuing the house in the divorce, it strengthens your case. I'll start drafting the paperwork." Jessica, of course, didn't take the news well. "You're seriously kicking me out of the house I helped pay for?" she said later that day, her voice dripping with indignation. "Helped pay for?" I scoffed. "You've barely contributed to the mortgage in years, Jessica. And even if you had, you forfeited your rights to this house the moment you decided to share a bed with someone else." "You're being so vindictive," she shouted, throwing her hands up. "This isn't fair, Ryan." "Fair?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you lied to me? When you mocked me behind my back? When you brought another man into our marriage and gave me an STD? Jessica flinched at that last part, her face turning red. For the first time, she looked genuinely ashamed. But I didn't let up. "You don't get to play the victim here, Jessica," I said. "You dug this grave. Now, you're going to lie in it." Within a week, the motion was filed, and Jessica was served with a formal notice to vacate the property. She fought it, of course, trying to spin the situation as me being controlling and spiteful. But the evidence I'd gathered was airtight. Between the videos, emails, and her own admissions, there was no way for her to argue her case. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me sole possession of the house while the divorce proceedings continued. The day Jessica moved out was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. She packed her things into a series of mismatched suitcases, her expression a mixture of anger and humiliation. "You're going to regret this," she said as she hauled the last of her bags to the door. I leaned against the frame, watching her with a cold smile. "Maybe, but not as much as you'll regret losing me." She didn't have a response for that. For once, Jessica was speechless. As she walked out the door, I felt a weight lift off my chest. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt free. Later that night, I sat in the now quiet house, reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the heartbreak. It was all still raw, but I felt stronger. Jessica thought she could break me, but she underestimated me. I wasn't broken. I was rebuilding. For the first few days after Jessica moved out, I expected her to fight harder. She wasn't the type to back down easily, and I braced myself for more of her manipulative tactics. But what I didn't expect was complete radio silence. At first, it felt too good to be true. No angry texts. No late-night phone calls. Just nothing. But Jessica wasn't disappearing into the shadows. Her world was just crumbling faster than I anticipated. The first sign came from her best friend, Lauren. She texted me out of the blue. "Ryan, what the hell is going on with Jessica? She just called me sobbing about losing her job. Said you ruined her life. What did you do?" I stared at the message, debating whether to reply. Lauren had always been loyal to Jessica, but she was also sharp enough to see through her BS when pushed. Finally, I texted back. "Ask her about Evan. Then decide if you still want to take her side." A few hours later, Lauren responded with a single message. "Oh my God." From what I gathered, Jessica's job had gone up in flames. Mark, her boss, wasn't willing to risk the company's reputation by keeping her around. Once the videos and emails came to light, HR got involved, and Jessica's position became untenable. She was let go under the guise of downsizing, but everyone knew the real reason. It didn't stop there. Her parents, Margaret and Robert, weren't shy about voicing their disappointment. They'd been the ones to help her cover first and last month's rent for a new apartment after I forced her out of the house. But when the details of her affair became public knowledge, their support waned. "You made your bed," Margaret apparently told her, according to Lauren. "Now lie in it." Then, there was Evan. I didn't hear the full story until much later, but from what I pieced together, Evan goes to Jessica almost immediately after our confrontation. Whether it was my warning about the STD or the fallout from her work scandal, he didn't stick around to pick up the pieces. Jessica tried to reach out to him, sending him long, desperate texts and leaving voicemails that went unanswered. Her once lover had vanished, leaving her more alone than ever. Despite all this, Jessica wasn't completely out of moves. She wasn't the type to admit defeat, even when the odds were stacked against her. One evening, about 2 weeks after she moved out, she showed up at the house unannounced. I heard the doorbell ring and opened it to find her standing there, looking disheveled and desperate. "What do you want, Jessica?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Can we just talk?" she said, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. "Please, Ryan. I need to explain." "There's nothing left to explain," I interrupted. "You lied. You cheated. You destroyed everything. What else is there to say?" Her lip trembled, and for a moment, I thought she might actually apologize. But then, true to form, she pivoted. "I wouldn't have done it if you hadn't made me feel so invisible," she snapped, her tone shifting from pleading to accusatory. "You never paid attention to me. You made me feel like I didn't matter." I stared at her, my anger bubbling to the surface. "So your solution was to humiliate me? To betray me? Don't you dare try to put this on me, Jessica. You had a choice, and you made the wrong one." She flinched but didn't back down. "I can't do this alone, Ryan. I'm losing everything. I need you." Her words hung in the air, but they didn't have the effect she was hoping for. "You need me?" I repeated, shaking my head. "You didn't need me when you were with Evan. You didn't need me when you mocked me behind my back. You made it clear I was just a backup plan, Jessica. Well, guess what? I'm not your safety net anymore." Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw real panic in her eyes. "Please," she whispered. "I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll fix this. Just give me one more chance." But her words felt hollow. Jessica wasn't asking for another chance because she loved me. She was asking because she was scared of what her life would look like without me. "No," I said firmly. "You don't get another chance. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it." I closed the door in her face, ignoring her muffled sobs as she stood on the porch. That night, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was satisfaction, yes, but also a lingering sadness. I didn't miss Jessica, but I mourned the person I thought she was. It wasn't the life I wanted, but it was the one I had now. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of it. A week after Jessica's dramatic doorstep plea, I started to think she might finally be backing off. The house was quiet, my phone stopped buzzing with her frantic calls, and I was slowly beginning to piece my life back together. Then, she struck again. It was a Friday morning, and I was on a conference call for work when my phone lit up with a flurry of notifications. At first, I ignored them, figuring it was spam or something unimportant. But when the call ended, I glanced at the screen and felt my blood run cold. Jessica had posted about me on social media. Not just a vague, cryptic post either. She went full scorched earth, airing our dirty laundry in front of her entire network of friends, family, and acquaintances. "My husband threw me out of our home after years of emotional neglect," one post read. "He's trying to paint me as the bad guy, but he's no saint. If anyone's to blame for this marriage falling apart, it's him." She attached pictures of herself crying, screenshots of texts taken out of context, and a long-winded caption about how I abandoned her when she needed me most. The comments were a mixed bag. Some people bought into her sob story, leaving sympathetic replies like, "Stay strong, Jessica. You deserve better. I can't believe Ryan would do that to you. What a jerk." But others weren't so kind. "Didn't you cheat on him? That's what I heard. Sounds like there's more to this story than you're letting on." One comment caught my attention. "You're blaming him for neglecting you, but didn't you give him an STD? Bold move, Jessica." I was furious. Jessica had crossed so many lines before, but this was a new low. She was actively trying to rewrite the narrative, twisting the truth to make herself look like the victim. I debated how to respond. Should I defend myself publicly? Ignore it? Call her and demand she take it down? In the end, I decided to fight fire with fire. That afternoon, I posted my own response. "Jessica cheated on me with another man, mocked me behind my back, and left me with more than just emotional scars. I have the proof, and anyone who wants to see it can DM me." If you're wondering why I ended our marriage, ask her about Miami. The post went viral within our social circle almost immediately. Messages flooded my inbox, most of them supportive. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. I had no idea Jessica was like that. Stay strong, Ryan." Jessica, predictably, wasn't thrilled. She called me less than an hour after I hit post, her voice shrill with fury. "Take that down," she screamed. "You're humiliating me." "You humiliated yourself," I replied coldly. "You want to play this game, Jessica? Fine, but don't cry when you lose." "You're pathetic," she spat before hanging up. But her attempts to turn people against me didn't stop there. A few days later, I got a call from Lauren, her former best friend. "You're not going to believe this," she said, laughing bitterly. "Jessica's been telling everyone you hacked her accounts and fabricated all that evidence." I groaned, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Of course she is." "Don't worry," Lauren said. "Nobody's buying it. After everything that's come out, she's burned almost every bridge she had. Even her parents are done with her." It was true. Jessica's support system was crumbling faster than she could rebuild it. Her parents had stopped speaking to her entirely, her friends were distancing themselves, and her career was in ruins. But instead of taking responsibility, she doubled down, growing more erratic with each passing day. The final straw came when she showed up at my office unannounced. I was in the middle of a meeting when the receptionist buzzed me. "Ryan, there's a woman here asking to see you. She says it's urgent." I frowned. "What's her name?" "Jessica," she said hesitantly. "Of course." I walked to the lobby, my jaw clenched. Jessica was standing there, looking as disheveled as ever, her makeup smudged and her hair a mess. She saw me and immediately started talking. "Ryan, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice frantic. "You're the only one who can help me." "Help you?" I said, crossing my arms. "Why would I do that?" "Because I have nothing left," she cried. "You've taken everything from me, my job, my reputation, my family. I'm begging you, Ryan. Please, just hear me out." Her desperation was palpable, but I felt no sympathy. "You did this to yourself, Jessica," I said firmly. "I didn't ruin your life, you did. And now you want me to clean up your mess? Not happening." "But I—" "Leave," I interrupted. "Now, or I'll call security." Jessica stared at me, her face crumpling in defeat. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the building. That night, I reflected on how far she'd fallen. The woman who once seemed so untouchable, so confident and manipulative, was now a shadow of her former self. And while part of me felt vindicated, another part felt strangely empty. I wasn't the same person I was when this started. Jessica had shattered me, but I'd rebuilt myself stronger. But as I sat there, alone in the quiet of my house, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of something new. I thought Jessica was finished. After our confrontation at my office, I figured she'd finally gotten the message and would leave me alone. But I should have known better. Jessica wasn't the type to bow out gracefully. She was determined to claw her way back, no matter how much damage it caused. It started with another social media stunt. This time, she took to Instagram, posting a cryptic video of herself crying, with melancholic music playing in the background. In the caption, she wrote, "Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Betrayed and broken, but still standing." The comments section exploded. "Stay strong, Jessica. You're so brave for sharing this. Men don't appreciate good women until it's too late. He doesn't deserve you." But just like before, the truth seeped in. Brave? Didn't she cheat on her husband? Wasn't she the one who got caught? Cry me a river. One particularly brutal comment read, "You're not broken because someone betrayed you. You're broken because you betrayed yourself." That one must have hit a nerve because the video disappeared within hours. Then came the anonymous emails. I received one from a burner account late one night, and the subject line alone made my stomach churn. "You think you've won?" The message was short but threatening. "Enjoy your little victory while it lasts. You can't keep everyone on your side forever. I'll make sure the truth about you comes out." I knew immediately it was Jessica. It wasn't her style to back off quietly, and the tone was unmistakable. But I wasn't intimidated. If anything, I was tired. The next blow came when she showed up at Lauren's house. Lauren called me later that day, furious. "She's lost it, Ryan." She was banging on my door, screaming about how I've betrayed her by siding with you. "What did you do?" I asked. "I told her to get off my porch before I called the cops," Lauren said. "She's spiraling, Ryan." "It's not pretty." Spiraling was putting it lightly. Jessica was running out of people to manipulate, and her desperation was growing by the day. The final straw came when Jessica decided to target my career. One morning, I walked into work and immediately sensed that something was off. People were whispering in clusters, glancing at me as I passed by. When I reached my desk, I found an envelope sitting on my chair. Inside was a printed email, one that Jessica had sent to my boss. The email was filled with lies, accusations of emotional abuse, claims that I had been unfaithful, and insinuations that I'd used company resources to spy on her during our marriage. It was a blatant attempt to smear my name and sabotage my career. My boss, Greg, called me into his office shortly after. "Ryan, I wanted to give you a heads up," he said, sliding the email across the desk. "This came in last night." I picked it up, reading through Jessica's desperate, venomous words. "You don't believe this, do you?" I asked. Greg shook his head. "Not for a second. I've known you for years, Ryan, but I thought you should see it for yourself." "Thanks," I said, feeling a mixture of relief and anger. "Do you want to press charges for harassment?" Greg asked. "Because this is crossing a line." I considered it for a moment. Part of me wanted to take legal action, to make her face real consequences for her behavior. But another part of me was just tired. "Not yet," I said finally. "Let me handle it." That evening, I called Jessica. She picked up on the second ring, her voice sharp. "What do you want, Ryan?" "You need to stop," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "The emails, the social media stunts, the harassment. It all ends now." "Or what?" she snapped. "You think you can bully me into silence?" "No," I said calmly, "but I can file for a restraining order. And if you keep pushing, I'll make sure every legal avenue is used against you. This is your final warning, Jessica. Leave me alone, or deal with the consequences." For a moment, there was silence. Then she laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You think you've won, don't you?" she said. "You think ruining my life makes you the good guy?" "This isn't about winning," I said. "This is about finally being free of you." She didn't have a response. Instead, she hung up, leaving me with nothing but the sound of the dial tone. The next day, Karen filed the restraining order. Jessica didn't contest it. Whether it was because she realized she was out of options, or because she was too exhausted to fight anymore, I didn't know. What I did know was that, for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The restraining order against Jessica felt like a shield, an invisible barrier keeping her chaos at bay. It had been weeks since our last conversation, and the silence was a welcome change. But there was still one final hurdle to clear: the divorce. Karen had been relentless in building my case, leveraging every piece of evidence I'd gathered. The videos, the emails, and even Jessica's erratic behavior in the months following our separation painted a crystal-clear picture. She doesn't have a leg to stand on, Karen told me during our last meeting. If she tries to fight for anything significant, assets, the house, alimony, we'll crush her in court. I didn't want to drag things out, though. As satisfying as it would have been to see Jessica squirm under the weight of her own lies, I was ready to move on. On the day of the divorce hearing, Jessica showed up looking like a shadow of her former self. Gone was the confident, polished woman I once knew. Her hair was unkempt, her face drawn and pale, and her clothes seemed hastily thrown together. She didn't meet my eyes as we sat across the courtroom, but I could feel her bitterness radiating like a storm cloud. Her lawyer tried to argue for a portion of the house's equity, claiming she had contributed financially during the marriage. But Karen countered with undeniable evidence that I had been the sole payer of the mortgage for years. When Jessica attempted to bring up the emotional neglect she'd been spouting since the beginning, Karen shut her down with the mountain of evidence detailing her affair. The judge wasn't having it. In light of the overwhelming evidence of infidelity and the financial documentation provided, I find no basis to award Mrs. Harris any claim to the marital home, he said, his tone firm. Furthermore, given the circumstances, I also find no grounds for spousal support. Jessica's face crumpled. For the first time since this all began, she looked genuinely defeated. After the ruling, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief, of course, but also a lingering sadness. Not for Jessica, but for the life I thought we'd have together. As I walked out of the courtroom, Karen clapped me on the back. "You're free now, Ryan. Go enjoy it." Her words stayed with me. I'm free. The first thing I did that evening was change the locks on the house. It wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. The second thing I did was box up everything that reminded me of Jessica. The wedding photos, her forgotten trinkets, the clothes she'd left behind. I donated most of it and tossed the rest into storage. It felt like a cleansing, a way to reclaim the space that had been tainted by her betrayal. Over the next few weeks, I focused on rebuilding. I joined a local hiking group, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I reconnected with old friends, many of whom had distanced themselves during my marriage because Jessica never liked them. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for myself. One evening, I received a call from Lauren. "Guess who's moving out of town?" she said, her tone smug. "Jessica?" "Yep. Apparently, she's heading to Chicago. Says she needs a fresh start." I chuckled. "A fresh start? Huh? Well, good riddance." Lauren sighed. "Honestly, Ryan, you handled this way better than most people would have. I don't know how you kept your cool." "I didn't," I admitted. "But I made it through. And that's what matters." Jessica's departure felt like the final chapter closing. For months, she had been a storm in my life, wreaking havoc and chaos. But now, the skies were clear. And as I sat on my porch that night, looking out at the sunset, I realized I wasn't just free of Jessica. I was free of the anger and pain she'd caused. It was time to move forward. In the weeks following the divorce and Jessica's departure, life started to feel lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there until it was gone. For so long, my identity had been wrapped up in our marriage. I was Jessica's husband, the steady partner, the man who ignored his gut instincts because he wanted to believe the best in someone he loved. But now, I was just Ryan, and I was finally okay with that. Looking back, there were so many red flags I ignored. The secretive texts, the sudden work trips, the way Jessica would dismiss my concerns with a laugh or a sharp comment. I blamed myself for not seeing it sooner, but I've learned that hindsight is a cruel teacher. The truth is, Jessica didn't break me. She woke me up. She forced me to confront my own fears, the fear of being alone, of starting over, of not being enough. And in doing so, she gave me a gift she never intended, the freedom to find myself again. One evening, I went through my phone and deleted the last remnants of Jessica's chaos. The emails, the screenshots, even the videos. I didn't need them anymore. They'd served their purpose, but keeping them felt like holding onto a grudge. I didn't want to be defined by the betrayal anymore. I also started thinking about what I'd learned through this mess, and I figured it might be worth sharing in case anyone reading this is going through something similar. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, don't ignore it. I spent months brushing aside my gut feelings because I didn't want to seem paranoid. But your intuition is there for a reason. Respect is non-negotiable. A healthy relationship is built on mutual respect, and the moment that respect is broken, the foundation starts to crumble. People show you who they are. Believe them. Jessica's manipulative tendencies didn't come out of nowhere. There were signs early on, but I was too blind, or maybe too hopeful, to see them for what they were. You're stronger than you think. I never imagined I'd survive something like this, but here I am. If I can get through it, so can you. I won't lie and say everything is perfect now. Some days, I still feel the sting of what happened. Betrayal doesn't just vanish overnight, but I've learned to let it fuel my growth rather than hold me back. I've started dating again, taking things slow and being more intentional about what I want in a partner. It's strange and a little scary, but it's also exciting. For the first time in a long time, I'm hopeful. As for Jessica, I don't know much about her life anymore, and I'm okay with that. Last I heard, she was trying to rebuild in Chicago, hopping between jobs and trying to mend the bridges she'd burned. I don't hate her anymore. Do I forgive her? Not entirely, but I've let go of the anger, and that's enough. To anyone reading this who feels trapped in a similar situation, here's my advice. You're not alone. You're not weak. And you're not defined by someone else's mistakes. Take your time. Heal at your own pace. And when you're ready, start rebuilding, brick by brick, step by step. Because life goes on. And sometimes, the end of one chapter is the start of something better. Thank you for listening my story. If you're going through something similar, I hope this gives you a little strength to keep going. You're stronger than you know. Here's to brighter days ahead.